Hello, I am Wanawultus, and welcome back to the spreadsheet. This time, I again will be talking about some power scaling in Star Trek, relating to some of the spaceships in Star Trek, specifically the pre-Kelvin timeline Star Trek continuity. So, this video is going to be about some amendments that I've made to some of the early power scaling, as well as some of the basic Cardassian power scaling. So, for example, in column A, I don't think anything really has changed. I've decided to box these up, of course, in order to separate the different scales, because I'm going to put scales all over the place, and I don't want them to be misconstrued as saying that the NX class is more powerful than the Kelvin class, which it is in no way whatsoever. Or at least it shouldn't be. Anyway, so the big thing that you might notice here is I have decided not to scale the Defiant directly with the Nebula and the Galaxy, but I've decided to insert the Nebula into here because the Intrepid class is more powerful than the Galaxy class. The Nebula class is about the same power as the Galaxy class, but I think the design is slightly better due to a couple of reasons, and that's why I put the Nebula class above. And the Defiant class and the Intrepid class, the reason I think that the Defiant is more powerful than the Intrepid class is because the Defiant class is a warship design, the Intrepid class is a standard explorer design, or more advanced, that is, and they were commissioned around the same time, and I have to go with the purpose-built warship as the more powerful one. Now, of course, all these scales are based on symmetrical warfare as opposed to asymmetrical warfare, as in what would the value be of each spaceship when engaging in symmetrical space combat. And by symmetrical, I mean when the two sides are fighting on equal terms with direct engagements with their weapons, as opposed to fighting guerrilla tactics or some special tactics such as beaming aboard a photon torpedo, which happened with the Borg probe and the Intrepid class. However, the reason that I don't put the Intrepid class above the Borg probe, or the Borg probe above the Intrepid class, is because that was an asymmetrical engagement. We didn't see them fight in a regular manner, and if the Borg had anticipated that type of strategy, they probably would not have allowed it to happen, because the Borg have really powerful shields and can probably block transporters from Voyager. Anyway, I've decided to simplify the scale here on column G over here, because I didn't really think it was necessary to reiterate that the Ambassador class is more powerful than the Excelsior class. I just decided that that would be good, and I still am unsure as to whether the Excelsior class refit, specifically the Lakota, would be more powerful than a regular Galaxy class, or a Nebula class, or an Intrepid class. Because it is based on an old design, but it has newer upgrades, so it's hard to tell, and the only thing that to really scale it off is the Defiant, which it engaged, and as far as I know, we haven't seen it fight anything else. It might be in one of the... we might see a ship of that type in one of the big space battles on DS9, but I haven't taken the time to look for all of those yet, which is why, by the way, I am not heavily scaling the Cardassians to the Federation quite yet, but I might get to that if I look back at some of the battles. Now, over here, regarding the Borg, I decided to add the Borg scout ship from the episode I, Borg. it is stated that it had around 5 crew members, and behind the scenes we can see that the spaceship isn't actually very large. But knowing things about Borg technology, I think it's fair to say that since it had a smaller crew, it's probably less powerful because of just how the Borg designs work, where the Borg require large amounts of drones for their ships to fully function. For example, in that one episode where they only had a handful of children, or Borg children to be exact, piloting a cube, it was still pretty powerful. It just wasn't too effective. And so we can say that the same thing about a smaller Borg ship, that it still probably packs a punch, but if that had encountered the USS Enterprise instead of the full-size Borg cube, then we would know who would win that battle. Because without adapting, that thing is not going to hold up to a TNG era photon torpedo. Just like to the phasers. Like in the episode where they first encountered the Borg cube, it happened. Another thing I'd like to say is, I think in the previous episode, or when talking about the same subject matter as I discussed in the previous episode, I think I may have and when I say that, when I say before I... Okay, let me restart. In the previous episode, or while discussing the subject matter of the previous episode with someone else that happened not in the previous episode, but off-screen somewhere else, I'm just discussing this stuff with someone else, I may have accidentally switched the episode titles of Tapestry and All Good Things, because of course they both have Q and a sort of time travel theme. So I may have accidentally switched the titles of those episodes, but if I did, I meant to say All Good Things. Anyway, now you may notice here that I am distinguishing between two different types of spheres, and the reason I'm doing that is I did some research, and apparently the sphere from the episode Drone seems to be significantly larger than the one in the movie First Contact. So I can't merge the power scale here simply because it doesn't scale well anymore. So I don't know how well the Sovereign class would do against this type of sphere. It might be more powerful than the Sovereign class. Borg Cube over Defiant class still holds. And another thing to mention is that the original Borg cubes that appeared in The Next Generation look a bit different from the ones that we see in First Contact and throughout Voyager. So some have suggested that it could be a different type of Borg cube, and for example, the one we first saw may be significantly larger. That is a possibility, which would distinguish between two different types of Borg cubes, but that still probably wouldn't change the scaling here, because we still have the cube is, even if there's two types, it's still better, but it might change the scaling in regards to the tactical cube if we see a bigger cube, even though that cube may be bigger. If it's not, it's hard to scale, is what I'm trying to say. If the tactical cube is the same size as the Voyager cubes, but we have a bigger cube in the first appearance, and then we can ask ourselves which one would scale better, the one that's armored, or the one that armored and more battle ready, or the one that is simply bigger. And that's a big debate, I guess, that would be happening. Anyway, Cardassian spaceships. There's 3 main classes that we see used in battle. We see the Keldon class, the Galar class, and the Hideki class throughout various dialogues, and potentially what happened off-screen in the episode where a number of Cardassian spaceships were beaten by the Nebula class. And potentially, those ships may or may not be Galar class. They could have been Hideki class or something similar. I'm not going to scale that, but from what we see on screen and from other canon material, I'm pretty sure it's fair to say that the Galaxy class is definitely more powerful than the Galar class. The Galar class is pretty powerful. It can probably hold its own against some of the other ships on here. It's just not as good as the Galaxy. And we see that theme throughout encounters with the Cardassians, where the Federation likes to hide its technology from the Cardassians because the Federation's technology is slightly more advanced in some respects. Another thing, the Keldon class, I can't really scale that too well because, as far as I know, it only appeared in 2 or 3 episodes. It's implied to be more powerful than the Galar class. And some Keldons in one episode, I think it's Vidaya's cast, were equipped with cloaking devices that they got from the Romulans, which, of course, made them an even bigger menace strategically. But the Hideki class is easy to scale against the other classes. It's smaller, less powerful, but I think it has a bit more mobility. But those are the 3 main Cardassian classes that we see, and eventually I'll try to maybe get some of the Dominion classes, and I'll also look at adding some classes from other science fiction universes to the spreadsheet. And then that's where the real controversy will begin, when I start comparing how powerful is, let's say, the Excelsior compared to a Hatak from Stargate. And then things just go downhill. That's when the real comment sections debates will begin. That's when I'll be seeing numbers all over the place as to how powerful these things are. However, I do have to say that the Hatak is probably more powerful than the original series Constitution class, and I think I'm going to make a separate episode on what the actual numerical range for the power of the Constitution class is, because we actually can see some evidence in series as to around how powerful it is. And another thing I'd like to say is that when looking at asteroid destroying feats, that's not always the best way to determine power, because unless you know exactly what the asteroid is made of and what density it is, and a number of other factors. For example, solar radiation can change the temperature of various objects. And you have to worry about gravitational fields, magnetic fields, and all sorts of different things and all those things can affect how tough an asteroid is to destroy. So asteroid destroying feats aren't really the best feats to go on, because you have to make a lot of different assumptions. But what's a lot better oftentimes is dialogue-based feats. But of course there are a few exceptions. For example, the famous Han Solo line about how many parsecs the Kessel Run is, or, well, no, not how many parsecs it is, but how many parsecs the Millennium Falcon could do the Kessel Run in, which, according to the script, is supposedly a blatant lie, because even scientifically speaking, it doesn't make sense as something to say. You really have to explain it away unless you actually look at the script, in which it says that that Obi-Wan obviously sees he sees right through this blatant lie that Han Solo was saying, not to be confused with Hans Olo. Question is, who would win in a fight, Han Solo or Hans Olo? We'll see how many of you out there get that reference, but that's enough for now, I guess. I don't really see a reason to continue with this episode. I think I talked about all the big changes that I made. I simplified a few things here and there, moved a couple things around, added some Cardassian stuff that I may expand in the future. If you have any knowledge as to how some of these things power scale, or any advice as to something that I've done wrong, then please do tell me. And if you do have knowledge as for in-canon power scaling on some of these things, please refer me to which episode or which behind-the-scenes stuff, or whatever dialogue or battle that it happened in, because that would be very useful. For example, the Cardassian special space defense. There are these defense stations that appeared in one episode, are pretty powerful, and it would be interesting to scale those. So thank you all for watching, and please do give me some advice, and if you have any to give, that is. And if you'd like to get others involved, I'd be happy. We'll make this a big project, all of us together. We'll see how we can power scale not only Star Trek, but all of fiction. Big goals here. You know, you've got Star Trek, Star Wars, Babylon 5, Stargate, Battlestar Galactica. We can go JJ Trek. Uh-oh, that's maybe a mean way to call it, but the new Battlestar Galactica, and of course Blake 7, Ben 10. that would be a nice thing to scale. Maybe some of the aliens in Ben 10 can actually scale pretty good against some spaceships. Earth 2, you know, I don't think we actually see any warships in Earth 2, so it's not the best thing to scale, because they used a civilian spaceship, and that's really the only spaceship we see in Earth 2. And there's a whole bunch of other things, even some video game stuff like Halo would be nice to scale. I don't actually know too much about the Halo spaceships, but that would be interesting. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I will be seeing you all next time on Awiltos over and out.